Hey everybody, this is Adam of the Almost Sideways Movie Podcast. This is the clip from the latest episode that just dropped. Make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe to this video and find us on any podcast form in the show notes down below.
We are doing the top 5 cop movies. I don't know. I grew up my entire life. I wanted to be a police officer. I idolized police officers, and that bled into my movie taste because I love everything about cop movies. And whether it's a buddy cop movie or like an undercover cop movie or a dirty cop movie, it doesn't matter. Like, these are like my movies, and I haven't had a list that was super indulgent in a while. And so I wanted to see what you guys would come up with for your cop movies.
I'm gonna go first here. My number 5 is this is the one I pulled an audible on. This is from 2016, and it is about someone who their entire life all they've wanted to be is a cop, and they finally get their chance. It's not necessarily all they thought it was going to be, but they kind of make it into that amazing experience and show that they are truly worthy of being a cop, even though everyone said they couldn't do it. Everyone said it couldn't be done. There's no way a bunny can be a cop. That's right. It is Zootopia. That is my number 5. It's just such a fun movie. And honestly, I think it's really, you could say, the only animated movie that you could truly say is a cop movie. And you got Judy Hopps, who's worked her way up into being a police officer, and how she's able to navigate all that with the help of her CI in the Fox voiced by Jason Bateman. No, it's great. It's such a fun movie. It's a great movie, and I think totally is a cop movie. So that's my number 5. Zach, you're next. Number 5.
I'm going to go with a movie that we mentioned briefly last week. I don't even know if either of you have seen this movie, quite honestly, but it's a movie I've thought about a lot since I first saw it. And it's a movie that is criminally underseen from the early 90s with our boy, Bill Paxton. And that movie is called One False Move, directed by Carl Franklin. And it is an awesome, underrated movie from the early 90s. It tells the story of a small town sheriff played by Bill Paxton. And he gets word that there is this robbery/assault that takes place with this band of criminals headed by a young Billy Bob Thornton. Very ominous in this movie, one of his great early performances. And they are on their way with their stash of goods to this small town in Arkansas where Bill Paxton is this kind of Andy Griffith-like sheriff who is, howdy, y'all. And, you know, the big city LA cops are also there, and they really kind of don't think much of the Bill Paxton character. They think he's just this yokel who kind of gets in their way. But as you watch the movie, there is much, much more information about the Bill Paxton character's backstory and how he even has maybe a relationship a little bit with these bands of thieves that are on their way to his small town. There's a reason why they're headed to Arkansas. Again, a movie where the police officer is the central character in the story. It's one of Paxton's best performances. We were trashing his acting skills in Twister, but he's really good in this movie. I wish he had had more roles like this where he appears to be very naive and rednecky, but deep down he's hiding a secret that says a lot more about his character and his backstory. And I don't know whatever happened to Carl Franklin. I think he made Devil in a Blue Dress, which I believe is also a pretty good police movie with Denzel Washington. But this movie's underrated, underseen, and I always think it's one of the best cop movies. So, One False Move, check it out. Have either of you seen that?
All right, Todd, number 5.
My number 5 is my buddy cop pick. It qualifies as a buddy cop pick, and that's Dragged Across Concrete, the 2019 movie. Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn play 2 cops who get suspended for their shady police work, and so they follow a lead to try to get a big score payday because the suspension is pretty strong because there's a video and they're probably not getting their jobs back. And Gibson and Vaughn, I think, give both the best performances of their careers. And since a lot of the movie is like they're suspended, I question whether I should include it, but they're still doing cop things. Like they're doing stakeouts, they're interviews and trailing guys, and it's really like a buddy cop movie to end all buddy cop movies because it's not about their friendship. It's about how cops are just cops, and like when their work's taken away, they really have nothing else to fall back on. It's like I think the movie is kind of like watching Hank Schrader and Gomez like out in the field for 2.5 hours. Like
Yes.
I think it's a fascinating movie
Great
to
movie.
watch, and I love Drag Across Concrete. So my buddy cop pick, I went there instead of going with a comedy.
I still need to see that one. Number 4 on my list is going back to the 60s. It won Best Picture in 1967. It is In the Heat of the Night, starring Sidney Poitier and Rod Steiger. I just saw this movie for the first time recently, like within the last year or two, and it is an amazing movie, a fascinating film, especially when you think of the context of the 60s. I mean, this is in the middle of the civil rights movement, and to make a movie about a black man going to the South and aiding in an investigation with these hick Southern cops in trying to find a killer on the run. Podia gives one of his best performances that I've seen, and Rod Steiger does an amazing job also. I feel like the ending is a little too wink wink happy ending type of deal, and a little too feel good to really hit home the way it should. But it's still an amazing film, and I mean, I think Sidney Poitier had one of the best years of any actor in 1967 when you think of In the Heat of the Night and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner coming out that year. He had an amazing year, and both films with kind of similar themes, looking at it in two completely different contexts, but it ended up making my list. So In the Heat of the Night, my choice from the 60s. I mean, it's kind of a hard one to argue with.
All right, so my number 4, Todd may get a little mad at, but it's a movie that was one of the first that I thought of when he mentioned cop movies. And so my pick is, I guess we could go the entire Naked Gun series, but
I knew this was coming.
I think my favorite Naked Gun movie is Naked Gun 33 1/3, which
Yes,
is with Frank Drebin, who is semi-retired. It's a little bit like Drag by Concrete, actually, because he's very bored with his life with Priscilla Presley. And so he gets involved by going to a sperm bank where Anna Nicole Smith works. Of course, he thinks it's an actual bank, but it's a sperm bank. Hey, haven't seen that one before. But we also have the inimitable O.J. Simpson, O.J. Simpson's last movie. And he plays his sidekick. There is a great opening sequence in this movie. Whether you think this movie is stupid or not, the opening sequence is a ripoff of the Battle Potemkin sequence the Odessa Steppe sequence from the Battleship Potemkin. It's except with babies. It's hilarious. And then when he says, "Look out! It's disgruntled postal workers," it gets you every time. The 1994 humor is topical. So aged poorly that it's just hilarious. And the final 25 minutes are the biggest single takedown of the Oscars in any movie imaginable. It is hilarious. And you're walking along the street where there's a party. I still have that Raquel Welch song stuck in my head after that movie. Anytime you have a movie with the line, I think Phil Donahue is throwing up into a tuba, you know it's a winner. And it's a great cop movie, too. So check it out. All the Naked Gun movies, but in particular, Naked Gun 33 1/3.
For number 4 is my entry of a dirty cop movie, and that is 2011's Oren Moverman movie Rampart, which is a really...
Yeah, that's not getting Merlot.
Yeah, I know. It's a brutal movie to watch, and it stars Woody Harrelson as he's a veteran, like racist, misogynist cop in LA Rampart division, although he really just kind of hates everybody, including himself probably. But it's a character study, and it like dives into his home life and his professional life. It has like the legends about his corrupt police work over the years, including I think he like murdered a serial date rapist at one point, and obviously got away with it. It makes you want to look away at times, but that's the beauty of Oren Moverman's movies. He makes these like really difficult movies to watch. This is his follow-up to The Messenger, and it's one of the most disturbing cop movies I've seen, but it's kind of an essential one too. It goes about in this like really slow documentary style, and but it draws you in at the same time, and it makes you kind of question things. I love Rampart. I don't know that there are that many fans of it, but I'm putting that at number 4 as my dirty cop movie.
Number 3 on my list is my entry from the 80s. It is the attack on Nakatomi Tower and one John McClane and his rescue of it. It's Die Hard. It had to be on my list. It had to be. And it arrives here at number 3. Bruce Willis makes his career. He's still living off of the legend of John McClane in many of the film roles he chooses now, and it's amazing. It's got everything you want in a great action movie. You've got the one man hero who's trying to save the day. You've got an amazing villain in Hans Gruber. You have the sidekick as Sergeant Al Powell, Reginald Vell Johnson, which pretty much started Family Matters. I mean, his role in this is basically Carl Winslow. This is it's a classic. Now, Die Hards 2 and 3 are pretty good. Everything past that, not so much. I never actually saw A Good Day to Die Hard. Live Free or Die Hard isn't horrible, but it's kind of sad that it's only PG-13.
But is John McClane really a good cop, though? I mean, I don't think they're showing Die Hard at the police academy. Okay, let's just put it that way.
And I mean, Alan Rickman in his film debut as Hans Gruber, it's just great. Okay.
All right, my number 3 is one of many cop movies with Al Pacino. You could choose a lot of different cop movies. He's pretty much good in all of them, except for Cruising. Cruising's terrible, but the rest of them are all pretty worth checking out. The one that I'm going to go with is the one that selfishly I like the best. It's also my favorite Christopher Nolan movie. It is Insomnia from 2002. And I've actually never seen the original Insomnia. And I'm sure it's a really good movie, and maybe I don't want to see it because just how much I like this movie, and I feel like it's a pretty faithful remake of the Scandinavian film from the late 90s. But this tells the story of Al Pacino. His name in the movie is Will Dormer, and he is a detective, a big city detective from Los Angeles who's flown up to the small town of Nightmute, Alaska to solve the disappearance and murder of a 17-year-old girl, kind of like One False Move. He's sort of flown into this small town where Hilary Swank is this kind of police trainee, and she really looks up to him, in part because there's this assumption that the local authorities are so incompetent at solving the crime. And actually, they really are. This is one of those rare cop movies where it's not so much about who did it. We know that Robin Williams is the murderer in this movie. This is, again, one of those rare Robin Williams performances where he is dark and ominous and not funny at all. He's brilliant. Just kind of shows how dynamic and what a range he really had as an actor. This movie is not so much about, though, who did it. It's about why. And even moreover, it's about the relationship between the Robin Williams character and the Al Pacino character, because, of course, something happens in the movie where they have to begin relying on each other to keep each other's secrets. And the dynamic between them is brilliant. There are just the exchanges that they have in this movie. There's an exchange that they have on a steamboat that is just phenomenal. They call each other in the middle of the night because, as the title infers, the sun never sets, and maybe it's a metaphor for Detective Dormer's soul. Who knows? This is Christopher Nolan's best movie, in part because it's not a mind twist movie so much. At least it's a mind twist movie in the sense that it's all internalized about the what this character has to navigate. It's not, a dreamscape like Inception or Tenet or anything like that. And as such, it's Christopher Nolan's best movie, and I think it's one of the best cop movies ever made. It's awesome movie. So check it out. Holds up really well, even 20 years later. This also has some great Pacino freak-out moments, too. Like, where is she, Finch? And then he goes through, like, the backpack and is like, we're going to plant the backpack. Yeah, we're going to do that. And then it's some great Pacino scene chewing in this movie amid a good story. So it's not just all that.
So my entry of a detective movie is 1991's David Mamet movie Homicide, which stars Joe Mantegna, who plays a Jewish homicide detective who is assigned to investigate the murder of an old Jewish woman, which leads him to fall in with a Zionist group, and he makes some discoveries that sort of connect to an older case. It has the feel of a great detective movie, but it's also sort of spiritual and meditative at the same time. William H. Macy plays his partner. Ving Rhames is also in there. I watched this movie for the first time in college for a class, and I've seen it a couple times since. It kind of is like
Duchin.
Dr. Duchin, exactly. I don't know. It's crept in my top 100 movies of all time. It's a cop movie, but it isn't just a cop movie. I also think it's Mamet as least indulgent dialogue here. He's after something different, but it's just as satisfying as a detective movie. And it may not be the absolute best movie in the genre, but I'll take any opportunity to mention it because I mean, I feel like it's criminally underseen and kind of a little masterpiece.
And my number 2 is my entry from the 2000s, and that is The Departed. Well, we got to talk about it, so I'm going to talk about it. It's my number 2. Martin Scorsese finally wins his Oscar. Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Mark Wahlberg, Jack Nicholson, Martin Sheen, Alec Baldwin. This is like Leo at his best. It's Matt Damon at his best. It's Jack Nicholson doing his thing better than he had like in the last like 20 years of his career. It's just, and Mark Wahlberg gets the Oscar nomination out of this as well, so we can say Oscar nominated Mark Wahlberg. It's a classic. Like, this is, of all the movies I remember seeing around this time, it is the one that you watched and knew right away, this is instant classic. And it will continue to be that instant classic. And the twists and turns that this movie has, it's been a while since I've seen it. I need to watch it again because it's totally worth it. I had to put it on the list. And the main character, like the main, like 3 or 4 characters outside of Jack are all cops. So you can't say that this does not qualify.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I didn't put it on for 2 reasons. One, I just thought it was almost too obvious. It's almost like Fargo. But also, Leo is not a cop. As Mark Wahlberg says, you will never be a Massachusetts state cop. You will never be a trooper. And so, he's not a cop in the movie. When does he ever become a cop? He's dismissed.
He also says we're the only 2 people in the world that know you're a cop.
Yeah.
So I think he officially is a cop. Like,
and I would say there are co-leads.
I thought Todd would get on my case on a technicality, so I just avoided it.
And I would say there's co-leads in this movie, and they are Leo and Matt Damon, and Matt Damon is a cop.
I just don't. I think it's a mob movie. I don't think it's a cop movie, but I mean, it would probably be number 1 otherwise.
All right, my number 2 movie is from 1996, another movie that I think kind of has gotten lost a little bit to time. It doesn't really have any solid like Blu-ray release. I own a really old DVD copy of it. It's not streaming anywhere. It's from a director who I think has largely been forgotten, but he made great movies in the 80s and 90s. That director is John Sayles, and the movie is Lone Star from 1996. An awesome movie starring Chris Cooper as a small-town sheriff whose father was also a sheriff. His father is played in flashbacks by a young Matthew McConaughey. And at the beginning of this movie, there is a skeleton that is dug up, and kind of like the Rosebud scene in Citizen Kane, you spend the rest of the movie trying to figure out who the skeleton parts belong to and why they kind of got there. Actually, maybe it's a little like First Cow in that respect. The movie is set against a backdrop of racial disharmony in this Texas border town where Chris Cooper is the sheriff. There is hostility and antagonism between the Hispanic neighborhood and the black neighborhood and the white neighborhood. And so the sheriff, who does have his own prejudices, to be sure, has to try to negotiate all these different sides of the town. And it actually goes, for much of the movie, it's not even really about the murder mystery. It's more just about Chris Cooper's relationship with all these different characters. This is also a great cast. Elizabeth Pena is in this movie. Chris Christopherson, Tony Frank, Clifton James. A lot of these kind of smaller character actors who got work in some of John Sayles' other movies. John Sayles was a director. I say was. He doesn't do a whole lot of work anymore. But he was a director who was very much interested in the intersections of different groups, different fragments, different factions of American society interacting with each other. And I think this is his best film. It's a movie that is very pertinent to the racial tension we've been seeing in 2020 and beyond, because it's fundamentally about how we as a society have more in common than we do differences. And that sounds really corny, but it's a message that I think gets really boldly expressed in this movie. It's a very hopeful movie, even if you don't see it right away. It's kind of like the total inverse of Crash. Okay, Crash was hokey, cliched. This movie has a much more authentic depiction of tension and the role of the police and police brutality, and also the legacy of fathers and sons. So I wish John Sayles made more movies. He made Matewan and Sunshine State and a few others. He's always an interesting director with powerful stories to tell, sort of like a cousin to Robert Altman with his big casts and kind of bucolic American settings. But this is one of the best films of the 90s, and I think it's my number 2 or 3 of 1996, but it's been largely forgotten, but it's a really awesome and powerful movie.
I feel like it might be Merlot. My number 2 is my police corruption movie, and that is L.A. Confidential.
Merlot.
Okay.
Oh, well, we know what's okay. Wonder what Terry's number 1 is going to be.
Yeah. Now I can't look it up though. So go ahead and talk about it because I go next with my number 1. So go for it.
All right. So this is the Curtis Hanson movie from 1997. It's a modern noir about 3 cops who are investigating a murder in L.A. in the 1950s. There's the clean cut cop, there's the celebrity cop, and the brutal cop, and they sort of join forces and investigate the criminal underworld of LA, and they're left seeing just how deep the corruption in the police leadership can actually be. The cast is unbelievable. It's Russell Crowe, Guy Pearce, and Kevin Spacey in the leads. The tone of the movie is dark and sexy. It's like a 1940s noir style, and it's got a bunch of twists and turns. You're never going to really see them coming unless you've seen it before, I guess. But it's been quite a while since I actually watched the movie, but it's the first movie that comes to mind when I think of police corruption, and that is its own category without going into like internal affairs, which I think is a completely different list. Like there is a whole slew of internal affairs movies I could have gone with, but I decided to say that that's not even really police. But LA Confidential is a great movie, and we never really talk about it. That's my.
I agree. We don't talk about this movie. So LA Confidential is number 1 on my list, and yeah, as I was looking at it, yeah, I have it rated higher than The Departed. At one point, I put together a top 10 of the 90s, and I made my top 10 of the 90s. And it's everything one in a movie. I mean, you've got the star power, you've got the twists and turns, you've got this look at the police force, but you've got these main characters that are all over the map. You've got Guy Pearce, who's trying to run the straight and narrow in a corrupt police force. You've got Russell Crowe, who has been told his whole life he's one thing and he's trying to become something else. You've got Kevin Spacey, who's living the life of a Hollywood cop, but yet trying to find a way to be considered legit. You've got James Cromwell, who is the police chief and of this corrupt station, and there's a reason he's the one. And then you've got all the ancillary pieces that are living in this world, and I mean, even down to like Simon Baker being in this movie. I mean, it is like those mid 90s to like early 2000s. That is just my era of movies, and this is like.
I went with a movie where you cannot argue that the protagonist is a police officer, and it is very much about the cop mentality and the trauma of being a cop. And that's a movie that I know Todd and I have talked about before. I believe it's Jack Nicholson's best performance in the movie, and it is from 2000, The Pledge, directed by Sean Penn. Boy, why doesn't Sean Penn direct more movies? I mean, everything he's directed.
They've sucked in the last few years.
Okay, well, I guess I haven't seen the recent ones, but this one, The Indian Runner and Into the Wild, were all great movies. But this is his best film, and it tells the story of Detective Jerry Black, who has just retired. I guess that's been a sort of recurring theme on this list: retired cops who get wanderlust and can't keep their mind out of cases that are pending, and so. The best he can, Jerry Black tries to solve the murder of this young girl. They think they have the culprit, played by an unbelievable 5-minute performance by Benicio del Toro. They think they've solved the case, and the parents of the little girl make Jack Nicholson make a pledge that he will find the killer. And so months later, he's fishing at the lake in Nevada, and he just is unsatisfied with the notion that Benicio del Toro was the killer. And so he develops basically this strange concoction to try to lure the killer back so he can catch him. And he does that by using the daughter of a character played by Robin Wright Penn. And the movie uses fishing as this analogy, which is just brilliant. And it also what's so great about the movie is that he's an unreliable protagonist. In the opening scenes, he has so much authority and control over the situation. You can tell he's a great cop, but as the movie goes along, you start seeing that, okay, is he really like onto something because he's, Columbo, or is he like losing his marbles a little bit? The Aaron Eckhart character, who's also in the police force, absolutely thinks this guy has lost any sort of, mentality for being a a cop. Just an incredible movie. Talk about great one-scene performances. Not just Mickey Rourke, but also Helen Mirren is in this movie. Let's see, who else? Mickey Rourke is in this movie. Patricia Clarkson. So many great one-scene performances. Vanessa Redgrave. Awesome movie, awesome performances, awesome everything, and I love it. It's one of my favorite movies of the 2000s, criminally underrated movie. Came out in like March of 2001. No one saw it, and
okay, my number one is my entry as an undercover cop movie, and that is from 2002, the Joe Carnahan movie Narc, which is about a narcotics officer who is brought into the fold to investigate the murder of another narc. Jason Patric is the main character, and he joins forces with Ray Liotta, who gives one of the best, most intense performances of the 2000s. And they dive into the case. They strong-arm subjects, and witnesses turn up dead, and it just moves at like this really nervous and furious pace. Carnahan is kind of fascinated with these kind of movies. Like, he wrote Pride and Glory, which is another pretty underrated cop movie. But this is like sort of cop movie masterpiece. Like, it's brutal, it's unpredictable, it feels like what it's like to be a cop, and plus the undercover part makes it even more fascinating, and the stakes get just like super high in this movie. It's not the best of that genre necessarily, because that's obviously Serpico, but this is like the first one that comes to mind when I think of the subgenre of undercover cop movies, and the ending scenes are just like chilling, and when everything is unveiled, it's a great movie. So my number one is Narc.